All right, everyone. Welcome. I think we're just going to give things 1 minute for folks to continue joining, and we'll get started at 12:01. All right, it's 12:01. We'll just go for it. We have a lot to talk about today with three really incredible panelists. So hi, and welcome to today's Quick Bites on building a diverse hiring process. I'm Jen Berliner. I'm the general manager of Moonshot Snacks and a board member of Naturally Bay Area. And I'm really excited to be here today with Matt and Levi and Pam, and to discuss what we're going to talk about today. So also want to thank Naturally Bay Area sponsors. We wouldn't be able to be here without the support from all of these amazing companies. So thank you to our sponsors. Mm-hmm. And with that, we can just kind of dive into things. Today's topic is really important, near and dear to my heart. And I think something that I hope, especially after today, that all of you will be thinking even more about. Just important on so many levels as the US population and the US consumer base get more diverse, as well as the fact that diverse companies are more resilient, more innovative, more adaptable, and have so many attributes that are only going to continue to be more important as we navigate this wild post-COVID world. So to start with, I'm just going to have our three awesome panelists tell you a little bit more about each of themselves and their background. And I think Levi, will start with you, please.
Yeah, you got it. Hi, my name is Levi, and I am the Chief People and Culture Officer for Bellwether Coffee. Bellwether Coffee is a Berkeley startup, kind of at the crossroads of coffee and tech. We produce a zero emissions electric and iOS operated coffee roaster with the mission of driving financial wealth to coffee farmers and farm workers. At Bellwether, I help to foster a strong culture of empathy that connects, culture with operations and the people that perform them. Previously to that, I was a VP of people at Blue Bottle Coffee for a good decade, and that's it about me.
Awesome. So excited to have you here today. Matt, you want to introduce yourself next, please?
Sure. My name is Matt Kreutz. I'm the CEO and founder of Firebrand Artisan Breads, based here in Oakland. We are a mission-based bakery that will be focused on hiring people who are formerly homeless, formerly incarcerated, or otherwise have barriers to employment and provide good jobs to our community. We use an open hiring model, which means we don't do resumes or background checks or applications or formal interviews. We just kind of bring people in and who need jobs and remove as many barriers as possible to employment and to a path to a better life. So happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Can't wait to hear more. And then last but not least, Pam.
Hi, I'm Pam McCoy. I work for Creative Alignments, which is a recruiting partner that helps growing CPG and natural food companies grow and scale their teams. And we're just a little bit different in that we use an hourly model instead of a commission structure. And then we are really focused on partnering with businesses that have a business kind of that's a force for good in either, creating people first cultures, really having a strong commitment to DEI, or creating products or services that make a positive impact to the world. So we're a little bit different. And then we also just really partner with our clients to really meet their DEI needs and kind of help consult and help them find diverse folks to join their team. Prior to Creative Alignments, I worked in the HR realm for a number of years, several growing tech kind of companies, and and I always had a diversity kind of awareness and hat on in all of those roles. And then from a personal standpoint, my family immigrated from Poland when I was 3, and I remember learning how to speak English before going into kindergarten and seeing my mom teach herself how to speak English. And I've just always had an appreciation for different cultures and backgrounds. And so I'm super excited to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion today.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And to, I guess, lay the groundwork for our conversation today about how to build a diverse hiring process, I think it would be great to just start with understanding how each of you thinks about like what is a diverse hiring process, and what does it mean to you and your organization. So Matt, maybe we can start with you on that one.
Sure. So like I said, we use a kind of open hiring model. The goal with that is just to remove as many barriers as possible. So we want to be bringing in and focus on bringing in people from who have employment gaps, who have history of incarceration or homelessness. So in order to do that, we try to just remove as many barriers as possible. Oftentimes when people are exiting kind of the system or being formerly incarcerated, like they have a lot of gaps that they need to fill, a lot of stigma that comes along with that. So we just try to remove that as much as possible by going through that open hiring process. And then for us, it's really just about trying to create a system that kind of bring people in and attracts the type of people we want. So we kind of went through a pretty big process of reviewing like our job descriptions and kind of who's meeting and greeting people to make sure that people can see themselves at the company, to make sure that people can really kind of, they're reflected in those job descriptions, that it's very clear that we're looking for people who have gaps or people who have barriers, and we make that pretty explicit. So for us, it's really just kind of putting that up front and making sure that we're removing as many barriers as we possibly can.
Awesome. What about at Bellwether, or for you, Levi?
Yeah, sure. And thanks, Matt. And I didn't say this in my intro, but yeah, I'm glad to be here too, and I appreciate and feel honored to be present. You know, we've really started from the very beginning. You know, the idea is that if we don't have a place for people to land, we can hire as diversely as possible, but folks won't stay or they won't be treated well, and that's not okay. That's not what we're building. So foundationally, like from the process, which I know we'll get into more later, it's really we have a system, we have a process that we use each and every time for every recruiting process, so that we were trying to reduce bias as much as possible. So if the process doesn't change, folks in the tech world tend to bring in their friends. You know, they want to introduce their friends to the recruiting team, and everybody knows somebody, and we really try to work with empathy, and we love when people bring people to us, but those people go through the exact same process, and you know, they kind of have to wait in line, you know, the same as everybody else. Like nobody cuts the line. And we also have to work really hard on you know, we hire engineers, and we hire a lot of folks with very specific technical skills, and we train hiring managers to look beyond the resume. The resume is one piece of information. A cover letter is one piece of information, and in fact, we don't require cover letters. Anybody can learn how to write a great cover letter, right? Like, but meeting somebody and going beyond what's written on a page is critical. So it's baked into the questions that we give hiring managers to ask. So again, like we might have 3 managers who are interviewing one person, but they're each looking for something different. And then at the end of that process, they come together to share what they've learned. And we also prep the candidate as much as possible. So like, we just believe, like, take the heat out of the interview process, because it's awful, and focus on the value of the job and the person, and is there a match. And that's the basis for hiring diversely. But it you know, that's just the beginning. You know, if the company is not welcoming, we're not going to be able to do it. We're just not going to be able to hold on to people. We're not going to be able to have people you know, see themselves reflected at all levels of the company, because we can't expect somebody to apply for a job where there's absolutely no representation. where like, and think that they are going to be successful. That doesn't, that's hard, but it's not impossible. It's do the work is the mantra that I'm saying today.
Yes, and
Yeah.
we were just talking before about how much Matt is doing the work too. Pam, would love to hear from your perspective as well.
Yeah, thank you. The first thing I just want to start out with and say is that your diverse hiring process doesn't have to be perfect. And I think the fact that you're all, listening to this webinar or joining or, listening to the recording, I think that that's a huge step, and hopefully you'll get some tidbits and ideas for your organizations. So I think it's totally fine to be transparent and kind of take small steps in the right direction, and you don't need to have it all 100% set. And with that saying, I totally agree with Matt and Levi about just having a good foundation in place for your company and making an inclusive culture, and one that's ready to embrace diversity, equity, inclusion, one that's committed to DEI. And I think once you have that, then you should be able to bring folks in. And so really looking at kind of the full process. So from the foundation of where your company's at, and then looking at every single stage of the process from your first interaction with a potential candidate to the day they're walking in for their orientation and onboarding, and making sure that it's an inclusive process and it's also welcoming diverse candidates and making them feel comfortable to apply and to interact with you during that process. And I think it's important to think about changing the perspective that we have about finding people that are culture fit and finding people that are culture add, and how can we make that a comfortable environment for folks. And then, specifically at Creative Alignments, we partner with our clients to help them with that. And I think it's different at every company. So we'll work with you on that. For our personal company and what we do, we've really focused on that foundation for us, by bringing in diversity consultant, doing training, really, being committed, creating a committee about DEI and having initiatives that we work towards, and then just being very deliberate and careful with our own recruiting process for our internal team. So that's what that kind of looks like for us.
Yeah, and you mentioned kind of like a couple of different stages too. I think it might be helpful if you could elaborate on that, because just like diversity doesn't mean one thing. The hiring process is not just like one solid uniform thing. There's kind of different components. And so I'd love for you to kind of break that apart and help, especially people at small brands like my own, where there's a million things going on, kind of what are the different pieces that we should be trying to be mindful of?
Yeah, absolutely. So I look at it as kind of start to finish, from first interactions and really foundation and employment brand as being the start. And I thought maybe I'll talk about each of those things: the foundation, job requirements and postings, searching for candidates, interview process, and then kind of all the way to kind of an offer and onboarding process. And maybe just give a couple kind of examples or ideas of things that that you can do kind of along the way. And I think the first thing that we kind of talked about is setting that foundation, making sure your company is ready to embrace DEI, and making it a comfortable environment, and then showing that in your employment brand. Everything that you're putting out there is what candidates will see, and you want diverse individuals to want to come to your company. So anything that you can do to kind of attract that those people to come and want to join you and want to stay in your company is important. So things that you can do are have a diversity, equity, inclusion statement on all of your job postings. I've seen some companies that put it at the top, which I love, but on the bottom is great too, but really encouraging folks to apply. I think having a statement or a web page or a specific page on your website devoted to DEI and what you're doing. And again, you don't have to be perfect, but you could say transparently, we're working towards this. We know we're not there, but these are the things that we're doing and we care about it. Also, posting things on any other kind of web presence you have as a company. So maybe your LinkedIn page for your company, if you have one, a Glassdoor page for your company, of course, your website, anything out there. And also it's just an individual, I think we use LinkedIn quite a bit. So if you're a hiring manager, posting content that you're excited and passionate about, people that you connect with, potential candidates, they're going to come to your LinkedIn page and if you're talking about DEI and sharing some cool things about your company, what you're doing, or things you're interested in, I think that that makes it a more inclusive environment. So I would say that's the first part. Other things you can do is partner with a diversity consultant, make sure that your partners for recruiting, if you use internal recruiters or external, make sure that they're aligned with your DEI goals and initiatives too. And so I think that's kind of the employer brand and foundation part. The next step is really thinking about what is the job that you're looking to post and to hire for, and really thinking about what are those requirements. I think you can do a lot there with requirements, and there's studies that show that individuals that might come from different backgrounds that are less represented won't apply for roles unless they hit every single requirement on the posting. I've actually done that myself, which is funny because you could totally do the job, but you're like, hey, I meet 9, but not 10 of the 10 items. And so, and then, research shows that white males are likely to apply if they meet, 1 or 2 of those requirements. So right there, that you're missing out on a great group of folks that you want to target and bring in. So I think just being really thoughtful about what are your true must-haves and then what are your nice-to-haves, and really separating those out and loosening them up so that you can really open that roll up for individuals that you want to apply. So when I partner with clients, I'm talking to them about, hey, do we really need a bachelor's degree for this? Is that really required to do this role? Could we get away with having just the equal amount of work experience in this role? Do we really need to know this system or tool, or is that something that could be learned on the job or taught? And so really like digging into those areas. Also, do we need 10 years of experience, or could we do 5? And are you willing to train individuals on a couple areas? And then I'm pretty clear about the job postings of saying what's required. And then if there's something that's a nice to have, literally writing nice to have or is a plus, because then people won't say, oh, well, that's part of the posting and it's required. I think language is super important as well. And so there's actually a really cool tool where you can plug in your job posting or your description online, and it'll actually tell you which words in your posting are more coded towards kind of masculine words and which ones are more feminine. So it can give you an idea of what, could you swap out a couple words and things that you don't think about. And so I think that that's a nice tool as well. And then we do, when I'm partnering with clients, very often clients will say, hey, could you give this a look and just give me a DEI kind of lens? And so we'll give suggestions, and they're usually pretty quick changes and really helps with that process. And I think that really opens up that posting. So that's the kind of next step of the process of really locking in what do you need for the role, and then making it kind of open for everyone. The next step is looking for candidates. So I think that you're going to have a group of folks that apply directly, and they're going to seek out your company and apply online, which is awesome. You want to make sure you have that strong, inclusive brand to attract people to come. But a lot of times you're going to be seeking out candidates. And a couple of things that you want to think about doing are, 1, you can post on diverse boards, job boards. There's tons out there. 2, you can search on specific associations related to the role. So right now I'm working on kind of a director of engineering or technology role, and I really would love to find some more female candidates. So I'm searching on NC WIT, Grace Hopper, women in tech organizations, and I'm actually putting those in my search fields and finding candidates based on that. You can find specific Slack channels for different groups that you might be targeting, meetups. There's tons out there. I also like posting roles on Indeed too, in addition to LinkedIn, if you can, because I think there's sometimes some candidates, depending on the types of roles, might use Indeed a little bit more than LinkedIn as a professional network. I love historical Black universities and colleges. I think that you could look to see if there's one in your area and specifically target and try to see if there's a job board for that school. A lot of those schools use Handshake as their system to post roles, and that's for their alumni network typically too. So I think that that's a great tip. Other things you can do, I know that it's not possible for everyone, but if you do have a budget and can invest in some tools, there's tons of things out there. There's tools that will do blind resume kind of tools, so you can actually eliminate all names and personal information and just review candidates blindly, which is really cool. We use a tool called Seek Out, where you could actually kind of search on diversity tags like gender or veteran status, things like that. You can also, if you were able to get a recruiter seat on LinkedIn and then actually use the search functions on like those associations, you could look at diverse fraternities and sororities. You could look at, those universities too, to pull from candidates. And then, there's other tools like Junco. I haven't used that myself, but I've heard that that plugs into your ATS and brings diverse candidates to you as well. And then, obviously we don't all have the resources to invest in all of these tools. You can also, if you just have your normal LinkedIn, you can send connection requests with a short message. So I think just being really thoughtful about what you're saying to candidates and highlighting some of the important things can be something that you do as well. I'm trying to think if I covered my notes of my tips and tools there.
I know I'm like furiously writing stuff down, so we'll have to get these from you, Pam, and send out the list to our listserv along with the recording, because this is really awesome.
And I was going to say too, feel free to shoot me an email at the end, and I'm happy to send any information to anyone that's interested. And then another resource too is use recruiting partners that are going to be able to do some of these things for you. And that care about DE&I. I think that that's super important as well. And then so that's kind of seeking out candidates. And then the interview process, I think that that's equally important. Here, I would try to have a diverse interview panel. So if you're bringing folks in, you want them to feel comfortable. So if you have, like for my, female director of engineering role, if I were to bring that candidate in front of a panel of just male interviewers, I feel like that's kind of intimidating and maybe not as comfortable. And so I think just having, a mix of folks on that panel, and then also preparing those folks that will be interviewing and getting on the same page of what are our true requirements and what questions are we asking, and making sure you're asking the same questions of every single candidate. You really can't compare apples to apples if you are asking one set of questions to one candidate and then another set to another candidate, and trying to compare those responses, and then try to take the bias out of that evaluation of those candidates as well. So avoid going with the gut feeling, like I just have a gut feeling about this person. Really go back to what did their responses say? What does their, what did they say during the interview? What does their background show? And really going off of those core tangible things. Also, communication. I think just having a really smooth, respectful, fast recruiting process is important. So really maintaining a great interaction from the day you interact with candidates to the day that you're onboarding them, and just welcoming them and showing them what you're about. I think that you're equally selling your company to these individuals as they're selling themselves and their skill set. So you really want to have a positive experience. And I would say things that help with that are just shortening the process, making sure they move quickly and they feel valued and respected during that process. And then my last thing that I think is really important is compensation. So there's a lot of great resources out there that you can go on and use free resources like salary.com. I think Glassdoor gives some free comp data as well. And look into what is the market pay range for the role that you're looking to bring in. And I would really encourage you to stick with that for your candidates. I think that there's a lot of data out there that shows that candidates that come from diverse backgrounds don't have the same amount of pay as others doing the same work. And I think that that's a perpetuated problem, and we have the ability to address that. So I've heard of situations where, really great candidate says, my expectations are 10K less than what the company was planning on paying. I would bring them up to that range. I mean, they're doing the work that you're planning to pay for, and they're going to add diversity, value, great ideas, and you're going to avoid any pay equity issues internally as you continue to grow your organization. So just do the right thing and pay them fairly. So that would be my last tidbit. I'm sorry, that was a lot of info, but hopefully there's some tidbits there and I'm happy to share afterwards as well.
Yeah, no, that was really amazing, Pam. And I think you just shared like such an incredible list of best practices. And so I think that's a good segue because Matt and Levi, I'd love to hear from you as leaders in your CPG companies, kind of on the ground, trying to hire people, trying to build these processes and also like make stuff and run a company. You know, a lot of our naturally Bay Area member companies are pretty small, where people are wearing a lot of hats. Like, what would you say to people in our community whose companies are maybe, you know, 5 or 10 people? Like, are there specific pieces that Pam mentioned or otherwise that are places that you would kind of say to start for someone who's like, oh shoot, we don't even have, you know, an HR department? So Matt, maybe you can start, please.
Yeah, I think just somewhere. I mean, I think just taking some time. I think, like Pam said, being deliberate. I think you have to be, as a leader, you have to think, okay, what's the vision for my company? What's the vision for this department? And then really move deliberately one step at a time, knowing that you're going to make mistakes. You're going to like mess up all the time. Like you're going to fumble along the way, but just starting somewhere. And then being really intentional, really deliberate, and then just have a vision for what you want that to look like. But I think as like a CEO, and you're looking at all the different hats you're wearing, I would strongly urge any CEO to remove the HR hat as quickly as physically possible. We held on to it. So we have 85 people now, and we didn't even have a part-time person till I think like 50 people. And then we had a full-time person come on at like 65 people, which was so stupid. That was not a smart move on our part at all. I mean, you know, so I mean, we made that, we didn't make a lot of mistakes along the way, but you know, it prevented us from being really intentional, I think, early on. And I think just as a leader, like the person who's often the CEO is often not the best person to lead the people organization. It's just not two completely different skill sets, but it's definitely two different mindsets. It's hard to be the dreamer and the like enforcer of structure in the same sentence. It's hard to I want to see the best in you, but also you were 10 minutes late, and if you're always 10 minutes late and we have a system and a process, like, it's hard to do that. So I would just recommend that you shed that hat as quickly as physically possible.
Yeah, I think that's such an interesting, good point. And for companies that are really on the small side, is that finding someone else in the organization if it's not in, you know, or part-time, like what can that look like?
You could start part-time with somebody who just kind of comes in, or you could start with like a consultant or somebody who helps like builds out systems and processes so that there's like very clear defined structures in place. So at least you're like not having to create the structure and then enforce the structure. Somebody can help you deliver a structure and deliver rules and accountability and can help you around that. So you could bring somebody in to kind of help with that. I know there's a lot of like bamboo HR and type systems that are kind of on the cheaper side that can kind of help kind of band-aid things together when you're smaller. And like I said, you could bring someone in part-time as well. You could also build somebody up in your organization that they can kind of wear that hat and be that person for you. But either one of those three can be good solutions. We started with somebody part-time who kind of came in and laid the groundwork. But I think, you know, you could also just bring in a consultant to kind of help build those structures.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think it's such a good point, and one I've never really heard anyone else make about removing this from the CEO or kind of role as soon as possible. But once you've said it, it makes a lot of sense. So thank you. Levi, what about you? What would you say to like small, naturally Bay Area companies?
Yeah, you know, I'm going to follow Matt here because Matt, as CEO founder of his company, I am Chief People and Culture Officer reporting into CEO. I can absolutely, CEO who was also founder, I can absolutely say 100% it is important to remove that role as soon as possible, so that the bias is real. Like when your company is your life, because a lot of entrepreneurs start their businesses and it becomes everything,
Sure.
rightfully so, whether it's healthy or not. We can get into that psychology later, but it means that you're going to be biased because you need something from it, and that's a good thing. That's what drives success in companies. It can also drive failure because you're too attached to a certain outcome, and the people stuff is too messy. Humans are humans, it's not easy, but we don't have to complicate it more if people are willing to check their egos, right? Like, because I think there is a point at which you have to say, I can let go.
Yeah.
I am going to hire or consult with the right person who is going to help me with the vision I have for the people in my company. And Matt is exactly right. What is the vision for your company? Do you want people to feel like they can't wait to get to work? Most of the time, half of the time, not everybody always wakes up and is like, oh my God, I cannot wait to get to work. We all have bad days, but that sense of there is meaning for me. Even if I have a hard day, I can recover quickly because I know people are behind me. I know that I'm welcome just as I am. So another something that I think doesn't get talked about enough is, well, one, Matt, you brought it up, that like, bring it in early, bring this function in early. It is not to be, you cannot wait. You will spend more money and time cleaning up the mistakes you made than you will actually be spending implementing awesome practices. And at Bellwether, I was hired when we were a 12-person pre-Series A company, and I was floored by the CEO's desire to spend that seed money on somebody like me. Told me they were committed to this work, and it has proven to be true. If we run surveys and people talk about the culture very positively, even if they're having a hard time with very quick and fast deadlines and things that are hard, the culture always stays in the positive, area of those surveys. I will say that, so the other thing that often gets missed is what does, like, we talk about safe and welcoming and inclusive, but what does that really mean in action? So what does it really look like? What does it really sound like? And part of it is thinking, okay, there are quiet people, there are loud people, there are people that interrupt all the time, there are people that always show up late. Like, how are you going to create a safe place for people to tell you what's going on for them? If somebody's quiet and somebody is loud, is there a reason that behind it that you will never know unless you ask and say, I notice you don't speak up a lot at meetings. You're so, your value is clear. I'd love to hear your voice more. Can you tell me more about that? And let that person tell you, I'm just quiet that's just who I am. And then you can say, I'd love to call on you. Is that okay? Right? That's safety. That's welcoming. That's inclusion. I'm a trans executive. I sit at an executive table with not one other non-binary person who has identified themselves to me or anybody else anyways. And so there's a real challenge for me sometimes in weighing the safety of saying something. It's just there. I don't think about I wonder if my team is going to discriminate, that doesn't, it can be subtle, it's implicit, it's built inside of me because we've all grown up under these systems. But when I feel like I can talk to somebody about it, then I and say, I'd love to speak up more, but the story I'm telling myself is that it's dangerous. And then the CEO or somebody else can reflect back to me your voice really matters, and your job, the value of your job is not based on the things that you say that need to be said that you think are dangerous. The value is, how does it change our company for the better? And so safety and welcoming is that's why you need somebody early. You need somebody who can recognize and build those things from your job description all the way through performance reviews, but then even in how feedback is given, because, we'll to speak to how different genders, of all kinds, take in feedback. I've had the experience of a cis white male giving me feedback in a way that felt incredibly scary to me. But from his viewpoint, he was just trying to help me develop a skill. But what I got was, oh no, I'm not doing something right, and I'm going to be judged on that. And we had to come to like, what were you really trying to tell me? And he was asking me, what happened when I gave you that information? And I can't say enough about the importance of creating safety, not just people not getting hurt at work, which is also really important, but the psychological, like spiritual safety of being a person, an authentic person at work.
If I could just piggyback for a second on that, I think it's usually people who start companies are a certain type of person, right? Like you're probably like a terrible employee, like you probably like are a little bit hard charging, and I think you have to recognize sometimes how you come off. And I think to Levi's point, I don't think I come off a certain way, but it's like put me on the bread shaping table and like no one's gonna talk to me. Like I look like a monster, like 6 feet tall, tattoos, like, you know what I mean? Like I come off way, but for me, I'm like, oh no, I'm fine. But I like, people are like, no, I'm not talking Matt today. And I think you need to be, especially when you're early and you're doing so many things, it's hard to check your ego, check your emotions, and like create that safe, welcoming environment when you are trying to do so many things. And typically when you start a company and you're hiring your friends, I know a guy who does this, I know a guy who does that. And you don't think about some of those things. And a lot of those people are really loyal to you. They're really your friends, or they know you really like, they know you very well. And so like, it's hard to tell them like, you're doing a terrible job, or like, you're not serving our purpose now, or to then bring in people who are different than the first people who started. Like that can be very difficult. And so I think just being aware and bringing those people in is just really important, just to piggyback on what Levi said.
Yeah. Thank you both for sharing that. And Levi, to go back to what you were mentioning about kind of the importance of like psychological safety in a culture. I mean, I know there's been a lot of research done about how important that is in workplaces, but I'm just trying to think like, do any of you have thoughts or suggestions on how companies or hiring managers can communicate or try to begin the very early stages of establishing a sense of psychological safety when communicating with candidates or trying to fill a role? Like, you can't put it all out on the table as much as or maybe you can, but how can we kind of like lead with that from the get-go, I guess, when building a relationship with a candidate or hiring?
Yeah, great, really great question. And put it all out on the table. Break the chains to traditional ways of doing business. That is the thing that we don't talk about enough, is that traditional legacy models are inherently racist and sexist and classist. And we know labor and management, it has a long history of having a really tense relationship. Let's break it down. Let's like use the tech term, disrupt it. Just do it. Find out, follow that vision that you want. Do you want people to feel great about the company they're working for, that you are building? Then do the work to find people to talk to who've done it. And like, don't have to remake the wheel. It's out there. Just find it, try things out, and be willing to change. This is something I say all the time. Be willing to be changed by what you hear. So listen to people who work for you, listen to the people who've paved this path before you, and be willing to be changed by it, so that you don't get stuck into thinking you have to do it this one way. So there's that. Yeah. Matt, were you gonna? jump in?
No, God, I'll
Yeah.
come quick.
And so I think like it kind of goes, Pam, it goes back to what you said, like you have a process that you follow. You have a system that you put into place. You train your hiring managers on that process. And what that does is it leaves the room for you to address the things that are harder to address, because you've got it. You can lean on a system, that people ask candidates the same questions. The reason why is so that you can control bias, you can control a hiring manager who has had an experience with someone who looks just like a candidate. Well, that experience might be there for them, but it doesn't matter because you've given them a list of questions. You've asked them to look for something specific, and you're going to check it in a panel discussion about that candidate. Okay, so you have your process. Then when something comes up for somebody where safety is an issue, they say a candidate reveals something and you want to help them feel safe, then you can do it because you've controlled for some of these other factors. As Pam, like, it's not a perfect process. You're never going to get it perfectly. We're making our best guesses at life everywhere, all the time, all day long. I've learned that specifically from being a parent. Every day I screw up 100 times, but hey, I'm trying. And the thing is, don't make your best guess at something you know nothing about. That's the only thing I'll add to that is don't make your best guess about what is safety for a Black person, an Asian American. Ask somebody, what does it feel like to be you at this company? Ask somebody else whose work this is. I'm not saying go to communities of color and make them teach you. I'm just saying, like, people, ask them some questions and find out if they're willing to talk to you, because their story is not your story. You can't tell their story. You can't feel their story. Find out. And that's how, I don't know. I mean, I know it's super prescriptive. I wish I could give everyone a formula of this is exactly how you do it. But yeah, I don't know, Jen, I hope that was something.
Yeah. No,
I think it's like great. It's so important to like put that out there that you're going to fuck up, like on all levels. Like, we'll hire people who walk off the street to shape bread, and I'll explicitly tell them, like, you are going to fuck up for a good solid month. Like, no, like, your hands are going to feel like they don't work. You're doing this, but it doesn't result in the thing that the hands say you should do. I mean, everywhere down to, like, in the office, I'm like, you're going to fuck up, but what's important is we just acknowledge that and we talk about it and move on and we're good. And I think around issues with diversity, I don't know what it's like to be a Black female. I don't. But I could be curious and respectful and bring that into the discussion and say, hey, I'm going to probably fuck this up a little bit. I may, like, in the process of being very curious and really just genuinely wanting to know more about you, like, that's my intention. But I would love to bring your perspective into the room. I'd love to hear more about you and learn and grow so that our organization can learn and grow and actually bring your voice in and do the inclusion part of that DEI. But I think you also have to acknowledge that, like, I'm probably going to not get all the words right. I'm probably not going to say the right things, but I care about you and I want you to be here and I want you to feel like you're included. And so please check me if I say something or do something, or please speak up and I will acknowledge and I will, like, correct. And then, of course, as a leader, you have to then do that. You have to, like, solicit the feedback and then actively go out of your way to make sure that everybody knows that you've listened, heard, and then corrected, so that people feel comfortable talking to you. But I think you have to make it very clear that you want that feedback and that you're gonna fuck up, and it's not malicious or anything. It's, being curious about it.
Not letting a fear of not doing it perfectly prevent you from having the conversation, asking the questions. Yeah.
I think you can feel like, oh, this is a landmine. I'm not gonna walk into this field, but then you end up leaving people feeling like you don't give a shit because you're not addressing it or talking about it either. And so I think
it starts to look like you're protecting yourself and your own feelings over the feeling of safety and welcoming of your team. And that is just true. And there's a natural part of that. As human beings, we try to avoid danger, but because of that old kind of system in our brains, then we actually avoid danger that doesn't really exist. And then it doesn't look the way you think it does.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Pam, is there anything that you want to add? I know we're kind of hitting time and there's like 20 more things that I could ask all three of you. I'm gonna seriously like rewatch this and take notes myself. So Pam, anything you want to add kind of on this, or just to like maybe bring us home?
Yeah, no, I mean, I've loved this conversation and discussion. I think that, you know, the big thing I would just hammer home is that it's an evolving process, and you're not, you know, I think it's totally okay to admit, you know, when you're talking to candidates or admit to your team that's existing of, hey, we're working on this. These are the things that we're doing, and this is our goal. But we're not 100% there. And I think that candidates appreciate that too. And I think that that's an important thing to bring up, to talk about your culture. And we were talking about that. Psychological safety too, like talk about those things, talk about what is your culture like, what, describe it for candidates so they get a good idea. But it's all evolving, and there's a lot of tools out there. Just, get help from experts like diversity consultants and things like that. But I think the fact that you're thinking about this and working in the right direction, I think is awesome. So yeah.
Great. Well, we'll definitely be following up with the list of some of the resources that you all have talked about today. So Levi, Matt, Pam, thank you so much. This was a really valuable discussion for me personally, and I know it will be for the community who joined in person, as well as all the folks who will watch the recording. So just really thank you for sharing your experiences and kind of personal reflections, as well as your kind of functional expertise. I really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. We have some other great events coming up, one on November 10th on finance and CPG valuations, and then some great marketing events coming in December. So hope to see many of you at those. And yeah, thank you. Happy Wednesday.
Yeah,
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.